So this is really cool for me today because Sam Thomas is my cousin. We've known each other for quite a long time. And, since we are cousins, I was trying to think of some dirt to share on him, but I have to be careful because he probably has more dirt on me. So the one story that I could come up with was when Sam was getting his Eagle Scout Award, they asked him to give a speech. How old were you at the time?
Probably like 17.
17 years old. And the speech was, stay in school. Kind of joking, stay in school. But Sam has really taken that advice to heart, and he has done a lot of schooling. He is an MD, MSc, the Chief Medical Officer, and co-founder of PocketRN, a board-certified internal medicine physician with advanced training in population health, a postdoctoral fellow at the Intermountain Healthcare Delivery Institute, and a hospitalist at Intermountain. So you really did it. You stayed in school for a long time, Sam. He recently graduated from the Stanford Intermountain Fellowship in Population Health and Delivery Science, where he worked closely with health system operators and academicians at Stanford Healthcare and Intermountain Healthcare to address many of the challenges faced by health systems. He received a BA in Russian and International Studies from the University of Utah, a master's in bioengineering, also from the University of Utah, a medical doctorate from the U, and a master's in health policy from Stanford School of Medicine. I know. He completed his residency training at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City and the VA and Intermountain Healthcare. Sam's research focuses on understanding and applying principles of implementation science and health service research to enable healthcare systems and providers to implement innovation to achieve the quadruple aim, which is improve patient experience, provider experience, quality of care, and cost of care. His research includes topics such as the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on healthcare delivery, team-based care, digital health solutions, social determinants of health, and integration of informal caregivers into healthcare teams. His work has been published in numerous journals. If you want to read them, the New England Journal of Medicine, Annals of Internal Medicine, and Health Service Research. So what Sam's going to talk about more today is PocketRN, which he is the co-founder of. It is a virtual nursing platform that provides high-quality virtual care to patients by mobilizing and empowering nurses with a wide array of specialization to work from the comfort of their home. PocketRN aims to close the gap between healthcare and home by partnering with key players in the healthcare ecosystem and enabling great access to care for patients and their loved ones. So please welcome Sam Thomas.
Thanks, Russ. So I don't get a chance to do this very often. This is actually the first opportunity I've had to do something like this, which is really fun. So thanks for having me. This is great. I was also tempted to give some dirt on Russ, but I won't do that unless you come to lunch. If you come to lunch, we're going to have a great time. And so in preparation for this, I first will explain a little bit more about PocketRN so you understand what I'm doing now and all the work that I'm involved with. But then after that, in preparation for this presentation, I just wanted to really put myself into your shoes and said, if I was starting today at Snow College as an undergraduate student, what would I be doing? What would I be thinking? What lessons would I learn? And then I kind of walked myself through undergraduate degree, graduate degree, residency, working, and now where I am today, and kind of pulled through lessons that I felt like were interesting. So although I'd never given a talk like this before, I've been to a lot of talks like this. And so I always found it really fascinating to just learn, where did this person come from? How did things evolve? How did things change? Because there's always this false idea that everything's really linear, that you figure out, you have this amazing idea, and then it just comes to you in the middle of the night, and you wake up and people are giving you money all of a sudden, and you're just running with it, and you're almost feel like you're in control the whole time. But my path was a very circuitous one. Much to my wife's chagrin, I was in school up until a year ago. I'm not young. I look young. But it was because I love to learn, and there was this entrepreneurial journey that I went on that I thought was fascinating. And hopefully you can find some interesting takeaways from it for yourself. But before I jump in, I just wanted to play this video that explains kind of what PocketRN is.
Have you or a loved one ever needed a little extra help with your medical care at home? Do you ever have questions, want clarification, or feel worried you might be doing something wrong? You are not alone. Over 50 million people in the United States either need a little extra care at home or care for someone who does. PocketRN's mission is to close the gap between home and healthcare by putting a nurse in your pocket. We enable you to video chat with specialized nurses at the push of a button. Here's how it works. Visit PocketRN.com on your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Then, specify the type of issue you need help with and request a meeting. PocketRN will match you with the nurse who specializes in the help you need. We'll send you a text when the nurse has reviewed your medical history and is ready to meet. Our nurses can answer your questions over video, walk you through how to perform specific tasks, or coordinate care with your existing health teams, clinics, and providers. Also, based on you and your loved one's care needs, our nurses can reach out regularly to check in on you. Say goodbye to uncertainty, waiting for a callback from your doctor, and unnecessary trips to the hospital. Say hello to qualified nurses who are on call and waiting to answer your questions, whether big or small. Let PocketRN take care of you and your loved ones from the comfort, safety, and convenience of your own home.
Great. So that's just a little bit about what PocketRN is, but it is a company that started out a year and a half ago. We are a VC-backed company, meaning that we've raised around $4 million up to a seed stage from angel investors and venture capitalist firms, and are actively trying to provide our solution to a lot of different health entities. So we partner with health systems, we partner with home care agencies, we partner with a lot of different groups to provide more care in the home. Just recently finished a clinical trial out at Stanford Healthcare where we were doing this work, and are now hoping to partner and are partnering with a lot of different institutions across the US. So exciting for me, really interesting, lots of challenges, lots of things for us to continue to learn at PocketRN. But you'll hear more about that story in just a minute. As mentioned, I wanted to start with that question. If I were to start today as an undergraduate student at Snow College, where would I start? But I had slides that I was making, and then I realized that if I have slides, you guys are going to write down what the slides say, potentially, and not write down the things that kind of come to you, or ideas that you have, or people that come to your mind about individuals that you should contact to think through your own kind of creative business ideas. And so that is, before I begin, one word of advice, which is just that if you're going to take notes, write down the ideas that you have about something, a question that you have, someone who you want to get in touch with, some problem that you want to solve, something you want to look into more, and then create a process for yourself to then revisit that list and then follow through with it. I can't tell you how many times I've created a list for myself on a scratch pad that said, call Josh Jones, and I never did it. But in the moment, I felt like this was something that I needed to do to really figure out how to understand a problem, get an answer to a question that I had. Create a process for yourself to revisit, hopefully within the next 24 hours. I would do it tonight, and then follow through with it, because you will talk yourself out of it later. Trust me. And actually, I listened to the presentation from the last individual that came and spoke, and he talked about this. Calling, what did he say? I took notes on it. Calling reluctancy, I think is what I said. So that was Dave Robinson talking about which is a real thing. You know, you can talk yourself out of really putting yourself out of your comfort zone to talk to people. But if you are feeling that impression to do it, one of the principles I'll talk about is really just putting yourself out there and getting outside the classroom, outside the building, to talk to as many people as you possibly can about your ideas, your thoughts. So that is, before I start, just the one piece of advice. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and one of the first principles that I wanted to share with you, is everyone enjoys everyone's journey for entrepreneurship is very different. Mine is very different from everyone else that came to speak in class. I had a chance to listen to a good portion of them, and there's a good chance that yours is going to be different from mine. And that's kind of the beauty of it. But it's also the challenge. No one can say for you what your path is going to be or give you that perfect framework for how to think through it. That being said, there are definitely principles and frameworks and things that you can do to think through ideas, these lenses that you can put on to think through a business challenge. or a legal challenge or a patent question, there are processes in place that help you think through innovation. And we'll touch on some of those today. But know that your journey is going to be different. And what entrepreneurship is looks very different for some people. For some, it's starting a business, dropping out of school. For others, it's finding a stable job or career, but being very entrepreneurial in that career and saying, I'm going to bring this business that currently exists, has been around for 50 years, some new ideas or some new ways to think about a problem. So being an entrepreneur means so many different things. And so to begin, let's go ahead and dive in. Freshman year, I was at the University of Utah. I had just come out of high school, and I knew I was going to serve an LDS mission, and so it was a fun year. I was very distracted. I didn't do much my freshman year. I took classes with my brothers who were at the University of Utah, biology, some generals. Didn't apply myself too much because I knew I was going to be gone for 2 years. I went to Russia, so I lived in Russia, tried to speak Russian, took about 8 months to do that. Learned a lot about humility, learned a lot about what really drives me, which for me, it was learning about other people. It was hearing people's stories and finding ways that I could try and solve their problems. I really enjoyed connecting with people, hearing what problems they had, and seeing if I could find a way to make their life better, which was not easy in Russian. Not a lot of people in Russia wanted to talk to me, surprisingly. But it was a great experience. And when I came back, I was a Russian major. I really enjoyed learning about the culture of Russia because I just spent 2 years talking to these different people. I wanted to know what made them tick. What was their environment like that made them who they were? And so I always kind of had a sense that I would go into medicine. And so I was also taking the biologies, the chemistries, things that would prepare me for applying to medical school, although I was always on edge for doing different things within business. I thought about law for a little bit. I thought about a lot of different things. I did a decent amount of studying, but I would, played a little bit of water polo. I just tried to just do things that were different, that kind of kept me learning and growing in different ways. And so that was kind of one of the first things that I suggest is, as a student, embrace being a student, which is an opportunity to explore. Because once you get out of college, it becomes harder to explore all these different areas. And one of the main reasons is because everyone understands what it feels like to be a student, because everyone once was a student. And so when you call them up, when you send them an email and say, hey, I'm a student, all their guards come down when you're asking for something from them, saying, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I really want to learn about what you do. I'm really curious how you think about this problem. I played that student card all the time, and I don't have it anymore. I'm sad about that, because now when I call people up, they're like, what's he trying to sell me? What is the approach? But when you're a student, all the doors are open. It was a great opportunity to just explore, and again, a very non-threatening approach, being a student, to talk to really anyone. And I would not hold back to email really anyone that you can potentially get a hold of that might be of interest to you. And so that's the first point, is just embracing being a student. And so throughout undergraduate days, I was a biology or a TA biology. I did certain things that were just very common for pre-med students. I did student government. I tried to figure out, is this something that I liked? I volunteered through the community center at the University of Utah. It's called the Benyon Center. I realized that there was organized service that was happening, which was fun and interesting, but I also realized that there's other service opportunities that we could create, and with a group of friends, decided to call up Einstein's Bagels and see how many free bagels I could get at the end of the day, because they throw a lot of bagels away. And so we would call 5 or 6 different or Einstein's Bagels. We would gather out 1,000 bagels. They'd give them to us for free. They put it in a big garbage bag. We would then have an event. We would invite all our friends over. We would cut them. We would bag them. We'd take them to the homeless shelter. And I realized something after doing this 10, 15 times, is that if you're passionate about something, if you're excited about something, there's no reason you can't just start doing it. A lot of times we feel like someone needs to tap us on the shoulder and throw us into something. But if there's something that you're excited about, whether it's entrepreneurship or service, a lot of times, if you take the initiative, the doors are open to do that. And so that was a fun thing for me to learn early on. I did a lot of research. My research was not exciting. I would look at monkey bones. And so we'd get monkey bones, we would cut them up into small pieces, and I would look at them under a microscope. for hours and hours and hours a day. I was studying the form of monkey bones, which looking back seems like a huge waste of time. But it was important for me to understand what it takes to answer small questions in medicine. So everything we know in science, if it's even the smallest answer, oftentimes took hundreds and hundreds of hours of someone doing something with meticulous repetition to be able to answer that small question. So it was really important for me to learn about what research involves. And then lastly, the last thing I want to talk about with my undergraduate career was I had an inkling that I wanted to become a physician. But it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a physician without going through all the work to get there, medical school, residency. And so what I decided is I'm gonna get as close to experiencing what it might be like to be a physician as soon as I can to really evaluate for myself, is this gonna be a waste of time to go down that path? It's a long path. And so I ended up being a CNA. It took about 2 weeks to get certified. Does anyone know what a CNA is, a certified nursing assistant? Okay, yeah, it is the person that helps you when you get to the hospital, transition from your bed to your wheelchair, takes you to the bathroom. They can't administer medications. It's just the activities of daily living. But what I wanted to figure out is, do I like being around sick people? Which, surprisingly, when I got to medical school, a few of my classmates realized they didn't like sick people. And they didn't like being around individuals that needed that type of help. And so they went into radiology and they were fine, they were great. But it was a surprise to them to realize that was such a big element of what their training would be. But I had this opportunity to be a CNA where I lived in the house of a man that had spinal muscular atrophy. And so spinal muscular atrophy is a condition where you have all of your sensory neurons, which means that you can feel everything, but you don't have your motor neurons, which is what controls your muscles. They slowly degrade over time. It's kind of similar to ALS. But if you can imagine a challenging scenario, as opposed to a quadriplegic that has a spinal injury, they can't feel or move anything. These patients often have bed sores because they can't tell when they're sitting too long in a certain position, and so they have other complications. But if you have spinal muscular atrophy, you feel everything, but can't do anything about it. So it's a really tough condition to have. Typically, you never learn to walk, and you're dependent on others for a majority of your life. And so my first job as a CNA was to take care of this man at night. And so I would go to his house, I would sleep in a room adjacent to his with a baby monitor on, and he would wake me up and I'd go to put his CPAP back on, I'd have to wash his mouth out, reposition him. So all night I was waking up constantly trying to reposition him. I'd do this a couple nights a week for 2 years. And I really got to experience what it was like for patients that have chronic illnesses trying to just live day to day at home. And the reason I bring this up is because this goes full circle with what I'm doing now. And so a lot of the experiences that you're having day in, day out, as you get out there and learn these different things, they change who you are in certain interesting ways that will lead to an opportunity down the road that might be of interest to you. And so that experience was my first experience with patient care. It motivated me to want to go to medical school, but more than that, it really gave me the empathy, or I should say the sympathy, because I wasn't in his shoes necessarily, the sympathy to be able to understand how complex care can be in the home. And so that was my undergraduate journey. Again, a lot of different things, just trying to test out different areas, get as much experience and exposure as possible, and trying to learn as much as I could. Studying, but not as much studying as what happened in medical school, because that was a grind. Medical school was a lot of studying. I ended up going to a lot of different interest groups. So they would come through every day between the 2 sessions for lunch. They'd bring free pizza and they'd have different interest groups. And I learned something about myself because I just loved learning about what other people were passionate about. And so I'd go to every interest groups, partly for the free pizza. I ate way too much pizza, living with 5 other guys, living off, I paid a lot of tuition, and so I wanted to take out loans only for tuition, for nothing else. And so maybe it was because I was cheap, but it was also because I was just really interested in learning what other people do. And so any experience you can just to kind of get out there and get exposed was really beneficial for me, and something that taught me something about myself, which is that I would have a really hard time picking one thing and just doing that one thing over and over again. And for me, what that meant is that I should go into something like internal medicine and not something like orthopedic surgery that was going to be a similar procedure over and over again. But it also meant that I was the type of person that just liked to explore. And partly it was because I wanted to find those challenges. I wanted to take something on that was really challenging and see if I could make it better. The cool part about entrepreneurship, and there's so many different definitions of entrepreneurship, is that entrepreneurship to me is the ability to create the world that you want to live in. And so instead of having this rote path of you're going to go to work and work 9 to 5 and get done with your work and go home and be done, that is really nice in many ways, to be able to kind of close the door on your work and go home and relax and enjoy it. Entrepreneurship is a little bit different. It's always on your mind. It's something that drives you morning and night. But there's also kind of this passion that you get to create something that can change the way that you or others experience the world, which I think is wildly powerful and wildly exciting. And for me, it was really interesting to do entrepreneurship because medicine is such a straight path. You go to medical school, you go to residency, you find a practice, and you practice until they tell you to stop because you're getting too old, your hands are too shaky, and you retire. And that's a very traditional path for medicine. I've got 2 brothers in medicine. Both took a very traditional path, medical school, residency, practicing, and they do their thing. But for me in medical school, there was this interesting opportunity where I did a contest actually very similar to what you guys are going to be doing with GRIT, which was Opportunity Quest. Yeah, so I did something very similar to you, but it was all around medical devices. And so with this opportunity, you get to meet a bunch of other students, and you get to hear from physicians about what problems they're having, and then you get a chance to think through those problems and build solutions. And then at the end of the competition, you get to present what was your medical device at a competition at the state capitol. And it had awards and money that would take you on to continue to do further development. But I loved it. It was a great opportunity to understand a problem and try and build out a solution. And so I liked it so much that there was an opportunity to take an additional year between my 3rd and 4th year of medical school to get a master's in biomedical engineering, which was a sacrifice in the sense that everyone that I was in, all my friends in class were going to graduate without me. They're going to move on, and I felt like I was being left in the dust. But I also felt like this was an interesting opportunity for me to gain some skills around how to think through problems. And there's a lot of interesting skills out there like that and a lot of ways to learn those frameworks that we probably won't have time to get into today. But the thing that I took away from that experience for me is that there will be opportunities that maybe a lot of people just put to the side and say, oh, not for me. The opportunity cost is too much, which means, I'm going to be losing too much money by adding another year of tuition or sacrificing that year as a physician that I could have made to be able to do something like this. But it's for everyone has to make that decision. For me, it was a no-brainer just because I knew myself that that's something that I wanted to integrate into my life and career was developing new medical devices. And so I took that extra year, did that master's in biomedical engineering, ended up starting 4 companies, only one of which is still going today, 3 of which we have patents around, and they're moving forward in very slow ways. Some that I just totally started and then finished, which was an interesting experience because many of them were great ideas, but great ideas only get you so far. There's so many other things that have to be in place for these to work. And this kind of goes back to those lenses. But the other thing that I learned a lot about during that year, getting that master's in biomedical engineering, is that the team is everything. And so I think I had a misconception in the very beginning that I didn't want to share my ideas with anyone because I felt like someone was going to steal those ideas. Felt like if I talked to someone about my new app or this new medical device and I talked to the surgeon, they're going to steal that idea and they're going to run with it. But what you don't realize is that the idea is just a small portion of the work that has to be done to build a company. And so I benefited a lot when I realized that I have to stop holding on to my secretive ideas and I need to go out and talk to as many people as possible. Number one, because I was trying to create that team. And you need a team to be able to take any idea forward. We all have our own strengths, weaknesses, experiences, relationships. And if you're only going with what it is that you have, you might be able to take an idea a certain percentage forward, but you need that team for bandwidth reasons, for maximizing strengths and weaknesses. I realized in biomedical engineering that I was not a great engineer. I was not going to be the one that was writing the code or doing the CAD models or working the lathe to build these medical devices. I was going to be the one that was talking to the physicians and the patients and trying to understand the problems and thinking through solutions. And so I needed a team to be able to do these other parts. I wasn't going to be able to write a patent. I wasn't going to be able to put together a business plan that made a lot of financial sense. That's what Russ is for. That's why you get an MBA. There's other people that do these different aspects. And so that socializing that idea is not only to do a gut check and to kind of evaluate it, but it's also to build that team. And to be honest, that is my favorite part about PocketRN is the team that we have. Again, I've got 3 co-founders, so 2 other co-founders, a chief technology officer, and a business, our CEO who was at business school at Stanford when I met her. The chief technology officer, I met doing one of those medical devices during the biodesign year 5 years previous to me starting this company. But I worked with him and I knew how much I liked this guy. And so I said, next company I start that I need an engineer, I'm pulling him in. And because I'd had that opportunity to work with him and see how brilliant he was with writing code. And so again, a lot of times it's not your first idea. And again, this still has a long way to go. So by no means is my story a success story, but it is, they all just kind of add and they build and you meet people. And so much of starting ideas, the people that you surround yourself with and the way that you think about putting that team together. Anyways, I know that we have until 1:15 or 1:20. Okay, perfect. So I think during that biomedical engineering year, I learned a few things. One principle was take the road less traveled sometimes. Sometimes you got to deviate from what path you think is going to be the most linear and the most one that makes most sense to you to take an opportunity to do something new. And then second is to embark on this journeys with others. Entrepreneurship is absolutely a team sport. I mean, it is. We like to think of Thomas Edison sitting back in his room thinking of brilliant ideas. But if you look at Thomas Edison's life, he had this massive team in Menlo Park building ideas, working on things day and night. I mean, it doesn't happen in an incubator. It happens in the world. And this takes me to my next point, which is throughout residency. So residency for me, I don't know if a lot of you know about medical residency, but it is a grind. It is a lot of work. It's typically 80 hours a week where you are in the hospital, seeing patients, writing notes. You eat when you can, you sleep when you can. And there was 3 years of that for me, which leaves very limited room for innovation, really anything else other than family. But what it did for me is put in the time to be able to own some aspect of medicine that I felt like was going to be important for me moving on. And so for me, I wanted to become an expert of something. And by doing that residency, I became a board-certified internist that could speak to medicine in a new, novel way. Whenever you think about disruption, does it happen external or internal? The answer is it depends. And within healthcare, I think it's important to have an understanding of the care being delivered, depending on the type of solution that you want to do. I knew for me, I wanted to do healthcare delivery. And so I wanted to be able to kind of own an aspect of the care that I wanted to change. But it was also in residency that I was the informal caregiver, or I was the one who was supposed to be helping my wife's grandma when she was sick at home. So between those really busy work weeks, I would check in on my wife's grandma, who had a lung condition where her oxygen would just drop because her lungs had all this fibrosis and scarring within them. And she was in a very unstable condition all the time. And so at 2 a.m., I would go over to her house, not infrequently, to check her pulse ox, to try to get her to go to the ER where she could get advanced therapies, and she would say no. And so I'd say, well, what can we do in this scenario? Let's do our best. And this went on for months and months and months. And unfortunately, she ended up passing away in the home. Again, she had a chronic illness that was not going to be improved. But for me, it was the one person that I truly wanted to figure out how to save. I couldn't. Because that was a big driving force for me to say, the system that we have is not working. There's something here that is not happening. There's gaps that are not being filled. And so in residency, and again, I shouldn't have been that person. I was already working too much. We should have figured something else out, but the system wasn't providing a solution for her. And this happens to millions of patients everywhere, all over the US and all over the world. And so at the end of residency, when a lot of people would normally just get a job and work as a primary care physician or work as a hospitalist or do another fellowship in cardiology, oncology, et cetera, I decided to take 2 more years and do a fellowship in population health, which I was the second cohort to go through it. It was new, it was untested. Who knew it would be the end result of it? But it sent me to Stanford for a year and then Intermountain for a year, where I worked with healthcare providers and health systems operators to rethink healthcare. And as it happened, it was March 2020, the very beginning of this fellowship, when everything changed for our world. And all of a sudden, I was thrown onto the front lines of the COVID pandemic in California, where they had a lot of early cases. And we saw this big scare, and we had to rethink, how do people get care in the home now if they're not going to come see us in the clinic? And so all of these interesting factors come together from the time I was in your seats as a CNA taking care of this man with spinal muscular atrophy to, what was maybe 10 years later as a fellow at Stanford trying to think through how do we deliver care differently. They kind of all come together in an interesting way to say, all right, what opportunity is there for us to really change the nature, change the rules of the game? How do we create the future that I want to live in? And so again, called on a few friends, some that I knew, that the engineer from years ago that I met in a different startup that we had, met our CEO in a class at Stanford as I was exploring different ways of learning and engaging, which is that maybe one of the last principles I want to talk about is just always being that continuous learner, always finding ways to engage, whether it's reading books, listening to podcasts, taking classes, talking to family and friends, networking. All those things are really beneficial. This is as opposed to shelling yourself off from the world in your own virtual reality. It's kind of getting out and exposing yourself to others, sharing ideas and being vulnerable. But through that whole process, at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, we said, we need to do something different here. And so we put together a team, and it took about 8 months of us just trying to understand the need, which is something that I had learned in my engineering degree, as well as a lot of the work that we did at Stanford, was to say, you spend a lot of times needing to understand the need before you ever get into the solution space, which is almost reverse from what I thought entrepreneurship was at the very beginning, where I thought it was the solution. You think of a really cool solution and you push that solution as far as you can. When that framework that I was taught that I think is really beneficial is, no, step back, really understand that need before ever jumping into the solution space. And what does it mean to understand someone's need? Well, a lot of it is empathy. You figure out, well, what problem are you trying to solve, and how do you put yourself in the shoes of that person experiencing that problem? And so for me, it was putting myself in the shoes of my wife's grandma and the family members that are trying to take care of her. For the problem that whatever you're trying to solve, do whatever you can to talk to as many people as you can, to do what we call like customer discovery interviews, where you say, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I just want to understand what it is that you're experiencing. Empathy is driven to help you understand needs. And so it's a really interesting opportunity to do that. One assignment, because we don't have time to look at it now, but not an assignment. I'm like giving assignments to your class. That's awful.
You can do that.
No, I won't. But one thing, if you want to look it up, it's really interesting, and I really like it. So Clayton Christensen. I told Russ that I wouldn't dive in too much to Clayton Christensen or other kind of business minds or thinkers, but he has an interesting YouTube. If you ever Google Clayton Christensen milkshake, he has a really interesting way by which he explains how we can try to understand the job to be done. And what he means by that is oftentimes we think, all right, this person has a problem. I'm going to go talk to that person. They're going to tell me what the problem is, and I'm going to think through a solution to fix it. But the issue with that is a lot of times who your customer is doesn't understand the nuance of the problem enough to really explain it to you. And so when Clayton Christensen talks about the milkshake, he'll talk about how at McDonald's, they knew that people were buying milkshakes in the morning. People were showing up at 6 a.m. buying milkshakes, buying nothing else, and going on their drive. And they were trying to increase the revenue from those milkshakes, but they couldn't figure out how to do it. They started to bring people in and say, well, what do you want for your milkshakes? And they say, I don't know, maybe like vanilla. And they would do all these changes. It would never change how many milkshakes they would share, until they took this path of empathy and said, all right, we're just going to observe people who are buying these milkshakes, and we're going to ask them different types of questions to understand what is the job to be done for that milkshake. And as you watch that YouTube, you'll get the answer to what they found out, which was really fascinating, and increase the sales of milkshakes 4x or whatnot, which isn't the point. The point is that they really figured out how to understand the need of that person better to come up with a better solution. And so probably time for me to wrap up to go to any questions in case you have any. But I would say that, again, really excited if I were to go back. I'm excited for you, because if I could go back at this time, looking at the world that we have now and the opportunities to do entrepreneurship, I think is incredibly exciting. I spent a lot of years in school trying to understand the frameworks and the structures of it, when most of my greatest learnings were happening outside the classroom and learning and talking to people and building things and just trying, putting myself out there, being really vulnerable. But I'll end there and see if there's any questions. And again, feel free to ask me questions about going into medicine or about entrepreneurship. Russ.
Can you briefly, you mentioned in PocketRN you've raised $4 million. You
Yep.
mentioned venture capital, angel investors. Can you briefly describe that process? I think a lot of our students don't know what that means, like how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's its own world. So that's the other nice thing about being an entrepreneur now, is there's ways to get money that doesn't mean that I have to take a second mortgage on my home, which is really nice. But there is a cost to it. And so when we first started our company, we had an agreement with Stanford that we would do a clinical trial with them. And they gave us a little bit of grant money. And grant money is great because it's free money, no strings attached, no equity involved, but it's very rarely enough to get a business off the ground. And so we said, okay, we've got a great opportunity to run a clinical trial at Stanford, and they've given us a little bit of money, and we're not a company, so we need to find money somewhere else. And so we decided to incorporate, become a company January 2021, and then we went and we talked to a network of angel investors. And so when we were at Stanford, it was, they were people that would come to class and they would present, and they were angel investors. They had former CEOs and former people that had made a lot of money starting companies, and you had opportunities to meet with them to get their ideas. And there was a few that I just said, we're looking for angel investors. Who do you know that is passionate about this need? Because we've got the right team and understand the need and the right idea to solve it. And the thing that they care about most is the team and the market size. So make sure the problem that you're trying to solve is large enough that they feel like they can get a return on their investment. And there's a lot of nuance around how they think about market size and how they think about return on investment and how quickly you have to do that. I don't know if I fully understand that. There's nuances there. But the thing that they always talk about is, who is your team? Like, who do you have that I can trust is going to stick with this? Meaning, for me, they said, well, are you going to just be a doctor and work full-time and then just do this on the side, or are you going to be running this company? And so right now, I'll do 2 or 3 nights a week in the hospital as a hospitalist, but my main job is to do this. Like, they want to know that there's commitment, that there's the right team in place. And so from there, there's the whole network of angel investors that will introduce you to VCs, and all of it is now on Zoom. And so you meet with them quickly, they do their due diligence, you pitch them, and then you come to terms, and there's certain processes that you put in place to make sure that those terms are favorable. If you really want to know the nuances of it, look up safe notes, look up YC, look up things that can really help you understand how to negotiate certain deals that are fair for you and the VCs. But that's another layer of nuance. But that was our path. And so quickly found a group of angels. We came to an agreement on how much they felt like we were valued and the money that they would put in. And then that was enough money for us to hire some people, build out the product, and say, now we're worth this much money. Who else wants to come in and give us some money at this new valuation that can then get us to the next stage? So it's very milestone based. And we're still in that process. And so we're still in the process of raising money, building out the team, building out the product, finding product market fit, and then going to the next stage. Yes?
So you talked about how you took kind of an unconventional path and did some detours. Is there a time that you, 2 questions. One, that you kind of regret doing the detour? I mean, you mentioned the monkey bones is kind of maybe a waste of time.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then is it ever too early to do a random detour? If you have, not necessarily random detour, but if you only have done associates, is that too
Great question. So for my path, I feel like I'm able to connect the dots between most things. And for me, if I was ever doing something that I just wasn't enjoying at all, like it was grueling, that's a red flag for me to not go down that path. And there was a few times where I started to go down something and I was like, this is just not what I like and not me. And so I had to pull back. But there weren't any scenarios where I spent more than a year or 6 months doing something that I felt like was a total waste of time. Partly, I'm an eternal optimist. And so I find the glass being full in any scenario. And so I will admit that I took a very circuitous path. I can connect the dots between them, but there's definitely a version of my journey that could have been more linear, that could have saved time. But it's hard to know. It's really hard to know because I feel like everything is so connected. And to your second question, remind me what it was again?
Just like, is it ever too early to kind of go on?
Oh, yes.
Or like, should you get a good foundation of like getting your bachelor's or starting something and then?
Great question. I should probably repeat that. But the question is it ever too early to start your kind of entrepreneurial path? And I would say no. I don't think it's ever too early. I wish I would have started earlier. Actually, I wish I would have done things before I did something like this in medical school, which was kind of the first thing for me to do it. I wish I would have done it earlier because I think that exposure, that networking is all important. There are certain problems that you will need just a baseline of experience or credentials to be able to tackle. But that just depends on the problem you're trying to solve. But even then, everyone's looking to the younger generations, all of you, to solve some problems that have been around for 50, 100 years. So if anything, being younger now means more than being younger 50 years ago, which at that point they were saying, oh, get the stripes on, you've got to go through the process. You've got to, build and you get all the work done before you can even approach us. But now I think it's different. I think people that are younger have more credibility to solve larger problems. Great question. We might be out of time, but happy to take any others. Let's go with you. Okay.
Thank you, Sam.